Instead of just a traditional open with no games last night, I'm going to do NBA midterms. Now you're thinking, wait a minute, midterms, we're like 10 plus games in. That's ridiculous. But if you think of the NBA as 8 semesters, then yeah, or 4 semesters, excuse me. 4 semesters, 20 games. Yeah, all right, so we're about midterms. It was just an exercise for me to get caught up on everything I needed to do and then share it with you. Buckle up, it may go really long. We'll go by seeding in the East. We're doing the East today. We'll do the West later, shortly. Okay, Milwaukee, they're 9-1, just lost recently to Atlanta. Is this the best Giannis has ever been? This is somebody who turns, what are we talking, 28 here coming up in December. The usage rate, now, for those playing along, usage rate on ESPN.com and usage rate on Basketball Reference can be different at times. I don't know if that's a lag in calculating the active players in the current season. So sometimes that could be part of it. But he's creeping around 40 for a usage rate, which would be behind only Westbrook and Harden. And then Kobe has one in there. And you know how I feel about that. I don't like it when you're up there. It means you're a little bit more predictable. And honestly, Giannis can be as predictable as anybody, but you're still sort of helpless to it because he's just going to get fouled all the time. So I don't know if that'll hold up. I doubt it will. There's no Middleton still. Pat Connaughton's been out, which speaks to kind of their top 6, where I look at their top 6, and then after those 6, I'm like, I don't really love it here. But we know that they're actually going to, despite not having their full rotation and an 8 and 9 that you love, their top 3 guys barely play over 30 minutes. And that's Drew, Brook, and Giannis. And it's like 32 down to Brook, who's barely at 30 minutes. Their offense is still not great, but they're 3 points better than anybody else defensively. So they're really, really good. And there's a chance they're going to get even better. And the Giannis thing's still absurd with him. But I would say it's a concern in the usage thing because it just history tells us that those teams don't really do well in the playoffs because you spent 80-something games watching one guy have the ball the whole fucking time. But that's not really the case in Milwaukee. I think it's a necessity right now, but not necessarily who they'll be. Cleveland, 8-2. That's with Darius Garland out 6 games. Mobley was a question mark for me, despite loving him, because he basically never makes any mistakes and he just does everything well. Some of the passes still, the help defense, the one-on-one defense, it's all incredible with him. But he was throwing it. If you check in either of the Boston games, and he's been doing it, he'll get some nice post position and he's got this soft jump hook too. So you're like, okay, now, if you're really going to be this guy that we're all freaking out about all the time, what are you going to show us offensively that's a real go-to and that's hard to defend? And he's been showing that more and more. And Mitchell is in the MVP conversation, which is just a nice way of saying he probably won't end up winning this thing. But this is peak Mitchell. It's peak Mitchell on defense, which has always been frustrating for me because he is a big guard. We've gotten in this argument before because he's not that tall. His wingspan is 6'9". He's thick as can be, and he's athletic as can be. There's no reason for him to ever be a below average defensive player. None whatsoever. And really defense, as we all know, it's up to you. How good or bad do you want to be on defense? The truly, truly elite, maybe the most gifted, the anticipation, studying all that stuff. I think it's basically selfish and a bad personality trait when you're terrible on defense, unless you're just a big trying to play the screen or these dropped and then defend the alley-oop, which is just, think Enes Kanter. All right. So Cleveland 8-2, and they still haven't had Garland for a good chunk of the season. So all of it's worked out. It's really good. They could be even better. Boston, the big thing that jumps out with me is Tatum. Now, when you look at some of the advanced stats, not that everything's perfect here, it's always kind of this funny path for some of the great players. There'll be a rookie sophomore season where this top pick who hey, do we have a guy? Could this be a guy? And then you'll see some of the PER stuff. You're like, wait, he's around 14 and 15. How come it's low? And that's what Tatum was, 15, which kind of tells you maybe an average player. I'm not sure if it's exactly the same now. And we know that it obviously favors big guys that don't play a ton of minutes, that rebound rate and have a high field goal percentage. And that's the Hassan Whiteside story in 12 seconds. All right. So for Tatum, it was 15 and 15. And then it goes to 21. And you're like, oh, all right. A guy on the right side of 25, 21, 20. He's at 27 now, 28 now, if you're rounding up a little bit. Then you're starting to talk about a real MVP candidate, somebody who I think last year there were times where I'm like, are Are we ready to anoint Tatum as a top 5 player? It felt a little soon. You start going through that list. You're like, okay, who is he jumping in here? Now it feels like a certainty. There's just another level of him and the way he's played, the way he shot the ball, the extra free throw attempts. He's playing 2 contact, which we talked about all offseason. He's been incredible. And like the box score plus minus stuff, if you don't want to listen to PER, he was in that 4 to 5 point range. So far this season, it's 7.5. The win shares per 48 when you're over 2, that 0.2, that's like really, really special stuff. So there you go. The offense is great for Boston. The defense isn't. It's 18th. There is something at least to look to with Rob Williams coming back, but they were incredible across the board statistically last year. So still pretty good about where they're at and their options, but the defense hasn't been as good. All right, Atlanta, they're actually your 4 seed today. They were 4-3, went to 7-3. 12th in offense, 14th in defense. They were 26th in defense last season. They were a very disappointing team last year. They beat New York. They beat New Orleans. They beat Milwaukee. The New York win was the one that probably we'll get to New York a little bit later. We were like massive comeback. I love Okongwu. He's not starting, but I wonder how that Capella Okongwu thing will play out. I just really like him. AJ Griffin had 24 the other night against the Bucks. Bogdanovich still isn't playing. So Hunter's still kind of the same. I actually like Jalen Johnson more of the minutes that I've seen him this year than last year, which is fine, but that's also off coming, not loving him necessarily at Duke. The thing I always keep paying attention to is like, okay, how are they using the DeJounte Murray-Trey stuff? They're doing a good job of splitting this, which may not really tell us much anything. DeJounte will ride out a good chunk of the third, then the fourth, and then Trey comes in, and then they obviously have to close the game together. Here's what's crazy. Trae Young's usage is actually higher this season than at any point in his career, which I thought was going to be impossible with DeJounte on the team. This team is last in passing. That's it. They pass the ball the least number. It's not assists. It's not assist ratio, any of that kind of stuff. They pass the ball less than any other team in basketball on, a game-to-game basis. How many passes do you average per game? Houston is usually down there in some of these passing categories, but Atlanta is actually last in this specific one. So the defense is better. There's some uptick in some of the rotational guys that I like. I'd like to see Hunter be a little bit better. Maybe it's never going to happen. I should stop thinking about it. But the Young and Murray thing, I think they're doing a good job with it. It gives you another really elite attacking offensive player, but I'm blown away by some of the other numbers that I looked at there. All right, keep it moving. Toronto, the 5th seed. Their offense is average. They're 9th in defense, but what they're really good with is their clutch numbers so far this season, which, they're absurd. They're like 145 points per 100 in clutch situations. If you've watched them in a close game, the way they crank up their defense is actually pretty impressive. So like the clutch net and all the clutch stuff is incredible for them. But as of now, this is kind of that collection of those 500-ish groups here in the East. Siakam, much like Tatum, another level, but he's going to be out 2 weeks. 25, 9, and 8, 48% overall, 34% shooting, and the 8 free throw attempts per game, which can really bump up some of those analytic stats for you. Scotty Barnes, the shooting and assist numbers are up, but he's actually playing less minutes. He's down about 4 minutes per game. I think that's probably because OG Anunoby has played all 11 games this season, which is always an interesting part. The thing that you don't like about Toronto is that half court's always been an issue, but their fast break points are number 1 in the NBA. Then there's a different transition point number there where I think they're number 2. So collectively, when you look at some of the other numbers here for them, there's a lot of good stuff in there. And we love the length, and Boucher's like a real guy, and Achua's had his moments. So they have a lot that they can throw at you. I'd expect that they're going to be on the better side of this 500-ish area that they're kind of stuck in right now very early. Okay, Chicago. They had these awful starts in the first quarter, which we've covered before. They're 6-6, good wins. Miami, Boston. They split with Toronto. I don't know if the Nets is even a good win. DeRozan's still awesome with 5 less field goal attempts per game, but more free throws. I don't know that that'll hold out, that he's going to have 5 less shot attempts per game, but that actually speaks to like him and trying to get the other guys more involved. Or maybe, maybe it's just a little blip here, 10, 12 games into this. So that's good news. Let's look at some of their numbers here. They're the worst clutch offense in the East, which is even worse because it's 28th in the league. Their offense just isn't that good. The offensive ranking it's just not happening. Levine's missed 4 games. Lonzo's been out. They gave these positive updates, but with no timeline this week. The Vooch trade, man, he shoots it. He's rebounding it like crazy, but it still just sucks because you now wouldn't trade Vooch, or you wouldn't trade Carter straight up for him. You wouldn't trade Franz straight up for him, and you wouldn't get a top 4 protected pick in 23 for Vooch. And I respect what Chicago was trying to do, but that trade's going to kind of haunt them now. And, it's just not good enough on offense for me to get all that excited, although they should definitely be playing a playoff series. Let's talk about the Pacers, 5-5. A little surprised about it. 7th in offense, 26th on D, negative point differential. They beat the Heat without Butler. They almost beat the Nets back-to-back. They beat them the first time, and then they came back from like 24 down to make that one weird. They started 1-4, so it's a little bit of a positive here. Halliburton solid, 22, 10, and 5. The 50 and 46% shooting splits, 46% from 3, incredible for him. And Mathurin is second only to Paolo in rookie scoring at just under 20 a game. They play fast, and they make threes. They have 4 guys shooting 40% or more on threes, 27 attempts total. So there's 27 attempts on 4 players there that are making 40% of their threes, and they pass the basketball. So a little surprising there for the Pacers. Kind of curious how that'll hold up. The Knicks, average offensively and defensively. Rebounding is okay. The starting group has been getting crushed. So I don't know what's going to happen there. There'll probably be some kind of change. But if you look at the differential with the starting group that comes out, and I believe that was the same 5 that are starters that were in the Atlanta game where they got smoked, there could be some changes coming. Randall's been better than he was last year. So he's kind of in between why did we sign this guy and MVP chance at the free throw line 2 years ago. All right. So he's been better. The problem was, even when he was good, it was get us through all these late game possessions. He doesn't necessarily have to do that anymore, and you don't want him to do it anymore because it wasn't really working out all that much. Brunson, more minutes, more shots, bigger numbers, points, and assist totals. The usage is actually down from where he was, because when he was allowed to go in, well, allowed is the wrong way to put it, but when he would go in and to run the offense without Luka, like all those possessions were his. They've got a bunch of guys, right? There's a Hardenstein-Mitchell conversation there. They're still trying to figure out these rotations. There's all these guys that play like 20 minutes. They're getting them in there. Toppin gets his minutes depending on the matchup and the lack of size they're going up against. But I think the real concerning part is, like, I wanted RJ Barrett to be better because I thought there was like just a thing I saw from him where it was taking a next step. And I haven't necessarily seen that. And his life should be a little bit easier with Brunson being as good as he is. Like, that should allow, it shouldn't like take away from RJ. That should allow him to get out there. But there's just, Fournier still playing minutes. When you look at their stat log, it's like, oh yeah, there's all these guys that play all these minutes and they still haven't quite figured it out, which I'm sure Thibodeau's losing his mind over. Okay, the 9th team in the East, Washington, 24th on offense, 21st on defense, 24th in net rating. This team has the number 1 percentage of their points from 2. That's 59%. Boston, on the other side, is last in percentage of points from 2, 43%, to put 59% into context there. Porzingis has played well. I think he shoots it well still. The threes, not exactly where you'd want it to be with that number. I think it's going to go up. He just looks really healthy. He looks like he's moving really well. And they have a really good scoring top 3 with Kuzma and Beal, who you just pencil in for, 25 plus a game. You just need another guy for this team to pop. And I don't know who that's ever going to be. I don't know if it's ever going to be Rui. Denny has 0 double-figure scoring games this season. Kispert's hurt all the time. And Johnny Davis, their lottery pick, is in the G League, struggling. So long-term, if you're looking at the Wizards, you're like, are any of these actual draft picks that, we spent some resources on, and are any of these guys actually going to pop? And early returns are, let's just say, concerning. Number 10 is Philly. All right. This is the most disappointing team in the East. I'm going to go here for a bit. Like Blake. Everybody here? I'm so sick of fucking tricking myself into liking them. And I know it's early. And if I go on some massive rant, and this will be used later on, because I seem to have like a string of going off on something and having immediately the opposite happens. But then long term, I'll be like, yep, see, I told you guys. There's so much I liked about what they did this offseason. Let's go through it, because I knew exactly what I was looking for because of what I've seen from them when they play. They're just lazy. This is a lazy fucking basketball team. Sorry I swore twice during the Sixers segment, but I'm just frustrated on your behalf, Philadelphia. And let's run through it. Okay, offense 11th, defense 16th. Who cares? They're 26th in rebounding, right? They run the second most isolations. Dallas number 1. By the way, Dallas is running a ton of isolation this year. They're like almost 17 possessions per 100. Number 1 in the league last year was just under 12. And again, if you're thinking, wait a minute, it feels like there's more than 16 isolations in a Dallas game. The way they track it is a little bit different. Okay, so Philly runs the second most isolation, but their screen assists are 24th. Their loose balls received per game on offense, last. If it's a loose ball on their end of the court, nobody's going for it. Okay, what about defense? A little bit better on defense, but overall, they are 28th on loose ball recoveries. Lakers are last. They're 29th on contested twos. They're 24th on contested threes. They are last on contested shots in the NBA. They have the second worst clutch field goal percentage. It's early. They're a lazy team that hasn't figured out, like for the life of me, a team that is collectively, these guys have never done anything. I mean, Doc's got a ring. And there's always this balance of like, if you're a coach, like, do I get on my guys? Is that the kind of personality that I have with this team? Do I have to get on them to get a result? Or do I have to keep telling them they're awesome all the time? And everybody's different. Some kids, if you're a high school coach, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, man, if I get on that guy, he kind of goes in a little bit of a funk. Or wait, this guy's in a bit of a funk. I got to tell him he's in a funk and he's being soft and whatever other words you want to use. And now he's going to respond because he's going to get mad at me and take it out on the opponent. All of us are different. I don't know what to do with Philly. Can you tell Embiid and Harden, like, hey, what the fuck, guys? Again, I swore again. I apologize. Harden is now at 9 seconds per possession. That's second behind Luka. Stop me if you heard that one before. The Maxey thing might be one of the slight positives because Maxey has more touches than everybody in the NBA except for 2 other guys. So when Harden, full-blown Harden, I was like, well, how's that going to affect Maxey? Maxey gets more touches because he moves, right? This basketball team doesn't move that much. And so the Maxey part of it, at certain nights, it's great. Harden, this is his 3rd straight year at 33% from 3. And I wonder if he, instead of hunting fouls, just shot the basketball, if he'd be back to that kind of 36, 37 range from 3 that we've seen during his prime. So the Harden Maxey thing worked out okay. That's the one positive. They were 1-4, went to 4-2. They beat Phoenix, but Chris Paul did leave the game, and Embiid's missed 4 games. So the however part of this is that they're probably still going to be having a decent record, but the results that we've seen so far, you can point directly to all those numbers of like, hey, do they do this well? Do they, like, where are all the hustle stats? And they're near the bottom in all of them, which is not surprising when you watch them play. You thought I was finished? I'm not. Brooklyn, from 1-5 to go 3-2 in their next 5. They're 4-7. Offense is 13th. Defense stinks, 22nd. Kyrie's missed 3 games. Durant's played in all 11. Simmons has missed 4. The Dallas Luka thing drove me crazy watching that game. Simmons not defending him. Yes, he got him in switches. Durant was the assigned defender on Luka. What is Simmons doing there if he can't? No one stops Luka. But the one thing we learned, as great as Mikal Bridges is as a defensive player, when you watched it play out in that series last year, he is basically putting a quarter in this Luka slot and going for a ride outside of the pharmacy. All right? There's nothing. The only thing you can hope to do is contest Luka with somebody who's big. All right. And if he gets burnt, fine. But you can't have somebody just beat physically. And with Simmons, you're like, isn't this what you talked about on the podcast about how fucking awesome you are defensively? Swear jar. And he doesn't even guard him. And then he was benched. He played 16 minutes in that game. So we've already been through a million of the Nets stuff. I'm getting closer to being like, I think I would trade these guys in season. Joe Harris doesn't look right. Claxton's been nice. But there's not, look, we've talked Nets a ton and we're going to do it with Bobby Marks. All right, a couple more teams to go. Miami's 12th in the East right now. This offense that I've never liked, and I still cannot believe that this team finished the number 1 seed last year. 21st on offense, 17th on defense. They were 4th on defense last year. So the offense has always been a little concerning. Butler's already missed a couple games. Lowry's played all 11. Bam's played all 11. It's really 7 guys. You know, you throw Strus, you throw Vincent in there, Dedmon maybe. Duncan Robinson is 34% overall shooting, and he's a defensive liability. And that's contract starting to look like it's going to sting a little bit because it feels like he's not really part of this rotation the way he was in the past when he was hitting everything. They don't shoot the ball well. They don't take a lot of free throws. They're not shooting it well from 3. They were first from 3 last year. This year, they're 20th. When things are going right, it's the Butler ISOs. It's the Bam shot creation for either himself or on rolls. It's Lowry making threes, or it's Strus having a nice night, maybe to cover for one of the other guys. When it's bad, you're looking at him going, how does this team score with the elite teams? Charlotte, 28th on offense, 13th on defense, 27th in shooting overall. LaMelo, 0 games. Rozier's missed 7. Hayward has missed 3. He's been okay. The center stuff, which was laughable last season, has been better because of Nick Richards playing more. Plumlee's the starter, but it feels like Richards more of the guy. The problem here for them is the draft picks. Like, are any of these guys going to give you anything? Bouknight's played. The numbers aren't good. Kai Jones, he jumped from 3.7 minutes per game last month to 6.5 minutes per game in November. Positive sign. Mark Williams, G League stuff. They were actually 3-3. Now they're 3-8. Detroit, 26th on offense, 29th on defense. 3rd most pick and roll behind Memphis and Atlanta. But their points per possession on pick and roll is average. Cade is better. I think he is. Yes. I'd like the numbers to be a little bit higher than 31% from 3 the last couple of years. I think when you look at this team, you just go, okay, is Cade going to be good? Yes. Does Ivy have a chance? Yes. It can be sloppy sometimes. I'm not worried. Duran is a real thing. Yes. Bey is better than last year when he was super disappointing, but he's still not shooting it from 3 as well. Bogdanovich is good for them because he can shoot and he can catch and kind of dribble penetrate a little bit. So there's some things here where I go, it's really about liking some of the young players. And as of right now, I like some of those young players, but they have been getting stomped. Orlando's 15th in the East. They've actually not been getting stomped as much. They have 8 clutch losses, which is 3 more than any other team in the NBA. The offense is 19th. The defense is 25th. They're another high frequency pick and roll team. They shoot it pretty well, but they're dealing with their own injuries. And they had when you're a lottery team that's maybe going for Wembanyama in this entire deal, like, I'm not going to get super concerned with you. Although I would say from a talent standpoint, like, there's a chance. And sometimes that chance works out where you're like, look at all these young talented guys and it's awesome. And then other times you're like, it's Towns and Wiggins and you're going, is this really going to be the foundation of something great in the future? And it wasn't. And the other side of that for Minnesota is TBD. But Orlando's still in that hopeful phase, same as Detroit. So I'm not going to sit here and start breaking down whether or not they run too much isolation because it doesn't matter.